Hi, may the 4th be with you. I'm Daniel Metler, and today is International Star Wars Day. So, these guys. And we're really excited that today we can release something that we've been working on for more than 10 years already. Because it's all about getting things done. A lot of people have a different way of doing things, and that's fine as long as they work by themselves. But once you're in a team, this can cause a lot of problems if people are not synced. For example, you ask somebody to write a blog post for you, and they will. And then when you get it and you're just about to make some final adjustments, you realize it's completely not what you expected. And it doesn't matter whether you didn't brief him correctly, or whether he didn't do a good job, or just doesn't know about how to write blog posts. The result is you'll do it again, and you'll have internal tensions because your coworker doesn't feel like you appreciate his work. And that's just a simple example. Let's take a much more dramatic example where one person creates a web theme, a layout, and he's been working on it for 2 weeks and it looks awesome. And everybody thinks he's done. Now the developer comes and he's going to build a really cool application on top of this. And he finds out that the web developer used a CSS framework, that's a design thing, like to define colors and fonts and things like that, that he's never used before. So he's going to waste 2 to 5 days trying to adjust his way of work to that, until he finally discovers that it simply cannot be done because the choice the designer made doesn't match with the requirements. And then both can start over. And this loses so much time and so much money, and this is standard in all teams. These kind of interactions, sometimes just small losses, big losses, happen millions of times every day, probably billions, because they really happen in almost every interaction with every team. And the scope is huge. And when I founded the company in 1999, we're a small web agency in Switzerland. And basically after about 6 years, we had a small team and everything, and I spent all of my day walking between desks, talking to people, trying to tell them how to do things the best way, how to solve historic problems, how to work around something. And it was frustrating because the core problem is that with the complexity of everybody working differently, things become so difficult that only the experts can actually still handle them. So the experts are left with the task of cleaning up behind everybody else, finding out what they did wrong, still trying to get it to work. It's very frustrating. And this, of course, also makes us lose the experts because they don't like their job. And what will happen next? They will just go to the next place and it'll just be the same thing 2 years down the road. And that's the reality. And when I realized this, it was like, goodness, I need a team operating system. I need something that does this. And there was no such thing. Because it kind of needs to be everything, right? In German, we have a really cool word called the eierlegende Wollmilchsau, which means like a pig that lays eggs and has wool and creates milk and everything. It had to be an everything thing. It kind of had to be like Wikipedia so that everybody could edit and cooperate. It had to be like checklists so that you could get things done. It had to be quality management, process management, and there was no such thing. And we envisioned this thing. And we've been working on this for over 10 years now. We've made 3 versions that didn't work, or they worked, but they were not good enough for the public. And now, version 4, on May the 4th, we're really excited to announce that it's finally out. And so I would like to welcome Azing. This is our brand new platform. It's a Wikipedia of recipes. And recipes are like checklists, but just much more powerful. You'll see in a moment. I'll give you a demo in a second. So it's kind of like a team operating system, but the foundation is the Wikipedia of recipes, which are shared globally among people and can be edited by anybody. So let me just give you a brief demo of how this works, because we're really excited, and I hope you can tell. So this is azing. This is what it looks like. It'll explain all these things for you, including how the Wikipedia concept works. And the amazing thing is really that it solves so many problems, whether it's knowledge management, which almost nobody has worked out so far, work management, process management, quality management, giving people a checklist to control their own work and letting them update it if they forgot a step changes how people think about challenges. It's really cool. And we've been doing this for 10 years with the previous 3 versions, and it really works. Then I'm going to show you a brief example, just how I just used this last week. So you kind of get an idea how this can actually make your life so much easier. We're all getting new laptop computers, and I've got the first one. So what I did is, instead of just setting it up, while setting it up, wrote a recipe for it. This is it. And let me just show you how it works. Basically, I just went in there, and in this word editor, I just wrote down all the steps that I need to do. And I put some steps into some other small recipes. You'll see that in a second. And then I saved it, and this is the recipe that I have. It looks very simple. And I can basically start and say, I'm going to do this install node using the version manager. In case I don't know what that is, I can click on it and look at the recipe for that specific thing. I may even run into some issues here because it says something about a global path variable that I may have never heard of before. Well, I can just click on that and it'll tell me how I can use this. Now, let's say I've completed that step. Then I will maybe say I'm not going to do this because for whatever reason, I might have already done it myself. Then I'll install some more things. And now I'd like to show you a cool example because this is one of the programs a developer needs to install. Visual Studio Code is very easy to install, like any program, but there are at least 2 things you can do not well. The first one is if you skip some settings when installing, it's not going to be so much fun. And just using the recipe ensures that people will not forget that. And now the really cool bit. I really love this font, which you have to install separately because it makes working with the Visual Studio Code so much better. And most of my team don't even know this font, but because they will be using the same recipe as I just used, they will be able to discover it and just put it in there immediately and get it to work. And if it was difficult to install, well, it's not anymore because they have a step-by-step instruction. So this is really, really powerful. Now, this sounds very technical. I'd like to give you a simpler example. We work a lot on DNN, which is an open source content management platform for making websites. And there's going to be this congress in Switzerland in a few days, in about a month. So I'm going to plan my business trip. As you can see here, I have a recipe that even has form fields in it, just to make sure I can keep my notes and all that tracked. So am I going with the family? No. And of course, here's what's really cool, right? We're 4 weeks ahead of time. I know I don't have luggage limitations. That's important for planning. I know I'm going to be able to use the plug because it's in my country. And now the big part, the giveaways. I mean, how many times have you left for something and 5 minutes before you leave, you're like, I should have prepared this and this is going to take me 2 hours and I don't have them. Now, 4 weeks ahead of time, I will run the prepare specs. I'm going to Switzerland, leaving 6th of June. I need these giveaways, the azing lenses. I need about 100 for all the attendees. And now I'm going to delegate this to marketing. I'm not going to demonstrate that right now, but I'm going to forward this to her. And I did this 4 weeks before I left simply because it was in the recipe. This makes work so much easier and you'll have so fewer conflicts with your coworkers because things will be done on time the right way. Yes, and of course I can pack my things and all that kind of stuff. So this is like one of my personal recipes. So we saw an IT recipe, a personal recipe, and now I'm going to show more of a developer kind of a recipe. But remember, this works for marketing booths. This works for hiring and firing. This works for just about anything you can think of. Now, this may look complicated, but in truth, it's just the same thing as before. If I would edit this, it's also just like a Word document. It has a few more placeholders here to make sure that we know these are form fields, But except for that, anybody that has, let's say, office capabilities can work, edit, manage these recipes, and the whole team can find the best way they want to do it together. So this is really, really cool. Now I'd like to show you one more technical example. This one is more for developers, and I'm not going to stay too long on this, but I'd just like to show you that even for really complex things, you have a beginner that might not know what a super user is. Well, he can just click on it and see it. Then he needs to install something. Well, he can just use a sub-recipe of how to install these extensions. We don't have to include it in the main recipe because versed users won't need this, and beginners can look it up. And even like really extensive follow-up steps like configuring languages, portals, things like that, which are very specific to this environment, and you may have never done this. You can just go through it step by step and figure out what you're doing. So this is our vision, is a global wiki of recipes that anybody can change, anybody can modify, and anybody can use to really make the most amazing kind of work and teamwork possible. So we really ask you to give it a try. Log on, make some recipes, and give us some feedback. Tell us what you love, what you hate, and just share the love. Thank you. This is Daniel from Azing in Switzerland.